You were covering the war in Afghanistan and Iraq. What brought you to Bangkok?
Well, I was just recently in Afghanistan, but I've been paying close attention to Thailand from Afghanistan.
Why?
Because I love Thailand. And so I was watching the news closely and emailing with my friends in Thailand, and I became worried about the situation here.
You mean you had some sort of prediction that Thailand might turn into something like Afghanistan?
I hope not. The Thai people...
No, when you were interested in Thailand,
yes,
was the political trouble already started?
Yes, it had already started. Well, I first noticed that it was getting worse in Thailand. I mean, me personally, I noticed about a year and a half ago, because my friends, my Thai friends, normally don't talk about politics when we're eating dinner or something. And they started increasingly talking about politics, and things that I was hearing people say caused me to think that unrest is building.
You covered wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Those were urban wars, similar to what you saw in Bangkok?
Iraq was. Afghanistan is...
You were in Baghdad, right?
I was in many cities in Iraq, Baghdad, Mosul, Kuba, many places.
Yep. But what were the similarities?
Actually, the violence here is not as high as what I saw in Iraq or in Afghanistan, thankfully, because most Thai people are peaceful. And so I think that, Thailand has a natural aversion to war, but it can happen. But once urban warfare breaks out, it's horrible. It destroys cities. It shatters the children's psyches. You know, it's very scary for everybody. Buildings get burned down. Buildings get blown up. One thing that's important to keep in mind that we saw in Iraq and in Afghanistan was in the beginning that the fighters were not competent. They didn't know what they were really doing. They could cause small damage. But as time evolved, they became more proficient. They became knowledgeable about weapons and tactics, and so the attacks became more effective. They became more deadly. They became more frequent. So that's one thing that's important to keep in mind here. In the beginning, they start out incompetent, but they're smart people, and they will become competent. So it's important to tamp it down.
As a war correspondent, covering the Bangkok street battles and Afghanistan and Iraq, what is the main difference?
Well, in Afghanistan, most of the fighting takes place outside of built-up areas. Afghans don't like to fight near their homes. Iraqis were the opposite. They would fight from their front door. They would fight in the cities. So most of the fighting that I experienced in Iraq was urban warfare, like you would probably see here. But, you know, fighting tends to spread like fire, and you know, and it can spread to the countryside very quickly.
In Iraq, some of the fighters disappeared into the communities, and the other side, American soldiers and the government soldiers, couldn't distinguish them or couldn't single out a terrorist as different from a normal citizen, right? Is it the same here?
That's an important point, and it's the same in Afghanistan. You can't distinguish. Now, one very important point that it's important to watch, I watch this closely in Iraq and Afghanistan, is the normal people. Are they willing to give information to the police and the army? Because if the normal people will give information to the police and the army, you will win. As long as the police and the army always behave well, that's incredibly important. When people committed atrocities, that caused the people to turn against them. When they tortured people or murdered innocent people, when they burned things like we saw here, that causes people to turn against even people that they used to believe in. And so that's why it's so crucial always that the military and the police be on always their best behavior.
Yeah. Did you also sense anti-military feelings among the Bangkok people when you were covering it?
Normal citizens seem to respect the army, so they've said only good things. The army and the police, from what I've seen, and I watch them very closely, they're treating the people with much respect, and they're being very professional.
The CNN and the BBC have been criticized by some, Thai people of being either biased or not knowledgeable enough, or perhaps not deep enough. What do you think of the CNN and BBC's coverage?
Well, Oftentimes, I haven't been paying very close attention because I've been on the street,
Yeah,
although I do
yeah.
watch it when I come back to my room. But it's important to understand that most of the correspondents aren't actually war correspondents, and so they often don't know what to watch for.
Yeah.
You know, for instance, to watch the police and the people and how do they interact. Do the people look fearful of the army? Do they look fearful of the police? And the people in Bangkok do not seem fearful of the army or the police because they're behaving professionally.
Do you think some of the foreign correspondents were biased?
Oh, there's always bias. I mean, I'm biased. I'm very pro-Thai, so, you know, I just have to admit to it.
When you say you're pro-Thai, it's difficult now to define because there's so many sides to the Thai people now.
It's complicated, isn't it?
Yes. What do you mean by being pro-Thai now?
Well, I just...
Pro-red, pro-yellow, pro-soldier?
Pro-peace.
Pro-peace, okay.
Yeah. Just hope that Thailand can avoid the war and continue to prosper the way it's been. It's been improving every year I come to Thailand. It seems like it's a little bit better year by year, and that's what I hope continues.
You never expected to be a war correspondent in Thailand in the first place, right?
No, and I hope that I do not become a war correspondent in Thailand. That would be a tragedy.
But as a war correspondent, what do you do when there's peace? There's no war for you to cover.
I'll start a garden.